record. And it's also an area where we're seeing more and more issues, problems, concerns crop up. So we're talking general mobile devices, not necessarily getting into all the software that can control it and install, but just a lot of the different options, the things to think of. So we have the BYOD, which we're starting to see more of, right? Bring your own device. That term I have heard. These other three acronyms are ones I don't hear very often, if at all, unless when I do the class. But you have corporate-owned, business-only, corporate-owned, personal-enabled, choose your own device. So I don't know that you'll need to know all those acronyms, except when they have a little scenario question and they're talking about having a corporate phone that is business-only. That's one of the deployment options that we have. I think we probably have one or the other. We either have bring your own or it's a company phone. I think most generally fall into one of those two things. Now, here we're talking you're a corporation or an enterprise, not me as a consultant coming in, but as a corporation or an enterprise. I used the example a week or two ago where my son, he's in mission down in Houston, and they are now using mobile phones, and we had to choose one of three phones to send down there because they were, approved by the church, by the mission, and the missionaries needed a phone, so you had to buy one of those three, and it was probably like $150, $225, and $300, depending on which one you went. They did say that when their mission was over, they would be able to keep their phones. So we do know Bryce chose the Samsung Galaxy S7 because it's one that when he gets home, it's going to be a more usable device for him, which was nice and good to know. And then, like I said, we send it to the mission home. They set it up on their service, their servers, so that it can be monitored, tracked, cleaned, remote wipe, those kind of things. So in that case, it was privately owned, but business only. So he owns the phone, but the company or the church completely controls that. He can't install apps if he wants to, unless it's approved ahead of time, or he goes through an approval process. So as far as those models, anything else that you would see that's different than this? The thing we don't want, right, is we don't want, and I see people doing it often, but we don't want to be walking around like this. Oh, which phone is it? Is it this phone? Is it that phone? That's what we try to avoid. But of course, sometimes you can't. If it's business only and you have your own phone, if the company's paying for it, well, then let them pay for it. So for you guys, which model do you guys follow? All right, you've got two. Which one is the Nampa phone? Does everybody have iPhones? Only iPhones? Does it matter what version or model?
No, we have some going back to like 5, and then all the way up to, I think, only IT has 8 right now.
So nothing above 8?
Not right now.
Could you get the new one if you wanted to, or just because of settings, features? Okay. Are they all on the same provider network?
Yes.
Most.
Yeah.
I think they are.
No, we have Verizon and AT&T.
Okay, so it's within 1 or 2.
Well, within the city, but not within IT.
Oh, in IT, I think it's all AT&T.
Nope, I don't know. It's Verizon.
You know, I have AT&T.
Do you? How does that work around here? I found Verizon's one of the better in this area.
I never have problems.
I think if you're in the city, it doesn't matter. If you were to drive up to McCall, we've noticed Verizon
Right.
is a little bit better than some of the others. So your officers in their cars, they're probably hooked up to Verizon or some other business solution using one of those cellular providers. One of the IT admins from Stinker teaches some classes, and they have CenturyLink, but then they have Verizon wireless cards as their backup. So if CenturyLink goes down, and it does go down from time to time, it automatically switches over to the Verizon card. That way, the point of sale application, gas, all that stuff still works. So So I think we're familiar with these. They should kind of make sense. We have some that have both. We have some that have their own. And it kind of varies on some of the solutions. I think it depends whether you're going to be a government, military, Albertsons. Here, right here, they don't pay for the phones, so we get to do whatever we want. But I still have my business accounts and my Outlook and 365 is here. Mobile device management. We talked about this, right, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. The main solution was BlackBerry, mainly because of corporate security and because BlackBerry would give Albertsons a server that they could install on their network to manage and maintain all of the BlackBerry devices. So, and of course, since then, we've seen Apple get to it. We've seen Android get to that level where we have remote wipe and we can control what softwares approve, what we can install, can't install. We can monitor, do all those kind of things. And for a while back then, companies would not use Apple or Android because of that express feature. If they wanted to do remote wipe or security, each device was handled on an individual level as opposed to through a server monitor. So we can enroll, manage devices, and then monitor those corporate apps. I'm not sure what the actual name is for Apple or for Android, but they do have their enterprise solutions. And there's a lot of third-party solutions as well if we choose to. So Apple, who else has, so everybody here has Apple for work?
For work, yeah. I have Android.
Android for home?
Android.
And you have both. I have just Android. Do you guys notice certain problems with or advantages to having Apple? Is that why, are you using Apple because it's more advantageous? Is it sometimes it's just the CEO likes Apple, so you go Apple.
Yeah.
I think part of it is like Apple just has like an easier interface to work with when it comes to like secure portions, because like the client that I worked with, they all had Apples. Like that's what company bought them.
Sure.
And that was the reason why, was because Duo was easy to set up on it without any like Android had some issues.
Yeah. And it's very true. My parents got Apple in the beginning because there was less options to set, but you get into Android and you've got options and sub options and so much more customization. Now we're not talking about jailbreaking or rooting yet. We're just talking the default operating systems.
You can basically install untrusted apps, which you cannot do. That's the way that
Yeah, well, I have a little checkbox to do it. Okay. There's something else. The other advantage is when you deal with Apple, if you have Apple 8, 7, 5, 10, each of those has their own operating system or their own kind of version of the operating system. So if everybody's running Apple 8, they are all identical. If I have Android and everybody has a new version of Android, Motorola has a different dialect of the flavor compared to Samsung. If you look at my wife's, she has Android 8.1, the Oreo. I've got Oreo, but if you go to our menu options, they're very, very different as far as how you get to different places and so forth. So a lot more overhead when we get into those pieces. Means we still have to, with our mobile devices, we still have to do our patch management, our updates, and those kind of things. And then our Android in the environment. Basically, with both of these, when we're talking enterprise, you can control almost everything for that user, similar to group policies. In fact, there is a mobile policy that we can set up some configurations for. So we can say they can or can't install certain apps. We can approve apps that they then can go and install. But again, still need to deal with our patch management and other pieces there. The other nice advantage nowadays with mobile is you almost always have a cellular/wireless option. And if wireless is available, it will use that. Anybody looked into or researched or is familiar with the new G5 networks? Verizon has had more and more commercials the last couple months talking about how they're now putting out their G5 Anybody know speeds? Gigs. I don't know. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I didn't.
G5 really wants to be viewed.
Apparently, let's do Verizon. Are you freaking kidding me?
You know, I would do
Take
Verizon
out the
Network,
specs, yeah. Take out
LTE5.
specs. It keeps looking at your specs.
All right, there we go. Still the G5 down there.
Doesn't like it.
What the crap?
Or might you just try
Speed. Just say
Verizon upgrade to
Let's try Verizon. Verizon.
That's
percent.
Oh. Finally, we still have 8.
300
Speed now.
There's AT&T and Verizon's 5G networks are coming. And that's why, because you're putting G5, it's looking for 5G.
5G. I put it in the wrong order. Thank you. So coming this year, your internet speeds will be insanely fast when they arrive. Verizon and AT have explicitly stated the speeds we can expect, but we know they will be much faster than, or they haven't explicitly. All right, so how fast? Samsung showcased its 5G home routers, achieve speeds up to 4 gigabits per second, 500 megabytes per second, which you could download a 50 gig game in under 2 minutes, or a 100 gigabyte 4K movie in under 4 minutes.
Which is crazy because like some home members in Syria don't even give a gig.
I know.
So they're gonna up the data limits
They're
now,
gonna
or
have to, right?
You would think so.
Well, they've got unlimited right now. You can pay for unlimited for each line, and it's like an extra like $10 to $15 per line, depending.
Well, shit, they need to turn on Wi-Fi. That's what
Yeah.
don't even need to.
You can get rid of your home. Yep. If you chose to, you'd probably have a lot better speed or performance. So let's see, give you an idea how fast it is. The average internet speed in the US in 16 was 55 megabits per second, which translates to a woeful 6.5 megabytes. And what did they say we're getting up here? 500 megabytes compared to 6.5. So you're talking
It
10.
won't be around here for a couple years.
Probably not.
That's 100 times. the speed.
Yeah, almost 100.
They don't really care too much about that.
But Boise's getting there. They're going to have to update all their new download speed testers because nothing goes that high. So let's ask the question: how will this technology change networking for us? Like Killian already said, you don't even need your CenturyLink now or your Cable One if you have unlimited data.
I love how reliable it is.
Okay, reliability will be a big issue. Hardware. Anybody have a phone right now? Yours would support it. Would your iPhone support 5G
I don't know.
out of the box?
I don't think so. I think they have to release new phones with new
There are some new phones that you can get now that will be able to upgrade to it. I want to say the 10 that will do it. I don't think mine does.
I don't know.
Is it G5? No, 5G. AT&T will use the 38 gigahertz spectrum for its initial rollout.
Verizon's first 5G phone to be the Moto Z3. So, yeah. So, yeah.
Moto.
Yeah.
Is that already out?
Not that. No, the
Promise for
Moto
early next year.
G. I think they're on like 7 right now, maybe.
Are they?
They've got a few different ones.
Yeah, it says they could be promised for early next year. And that's about the thing.
So I imagine some of them have the hardware. I'm sure you'll have to upgrade software.
But part of it too, like for Verizon, a lot of it is just like going into an account and like allowing that access.
Setting an option,
Yeah.
a feature.
Or on the back end.
Yeah, now the question will be, a lot of companies now say that if like for CenturyLink or Cable One, if they have upgraded speeds under your same plan, they'll do that for you automatically. I don't know if that's necessarily. Let's see, 1G was analog, 2G cellular, CDMA, GSM.
Keep going and see what's like.
OFDM.
Well, up on the related question going right, will present smartphones support 5G networks?
Kidding me? Let's do this. A big no, the present smartphones will not support 5G. We are much more aware that many of our phones will still do not support 4G. However, cellular operators will always keep their legacy networks and new networks. So, okay, so speeds will kind of change a lot as far as what we can do. Obviously, the hardware is going to be our kind of our speed bump for right now as far as do we have phones that support it. I think you could probably see a lot more of like the wireless cards, like mobile cards that could become a valid solution. I don't know the cost on those. We talked earlier in the class about our 4 network types, right? LAN, CAN, MAN, WAN, local area, campus area, metropolitan, and wide area. And we kind of said there's a 5th one that they're talking about now, which is our PAN, that's our personal. That's going to be like your Bluetooth, your tethering, your NFC, those types of things where you're talking much more local in connectivity. Infrared, I think the only infrared I have now is my TV remote. I've got 2 Roku devices. One is wireless, one is infrared. So if I have the wrong remote, it will or won't work. NFC, anybody use that?
Yeah.
Okay, for payments?
Yeah, for Nintendo.
Okay, how do you use it for Nintendo?
You've got the little amiibos, the little action figures. They've got an NFC chip in the bottom of them. You scan them on either the controller or like the Switch itself, and it gives you a game item.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Get them at Best Buy.
It's true.
Does it have to be a new? Is it a new Nintendo?
Yeah, it's either the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Wii U also have a controller.
Is Switch the newest model, and that's what they call it, the Switch?
Yeah, the Nintendo Switch.
Okay. Maybe my nephews have that because they have little.
It's like a little, it's just like a handheld, but then also like you
Like a
can set it up
tablet
to the
with
TV,
controllers
feed
attached.
it.
They do have that because I know they have the little, not Pokemon, but some little characters
Yep.
that they'll swap out, and based on that, okay. I didn't realize that's what it was using NFC. All right, so gaming. Most of us probably use it for payment options. I know on I have the Samsung S3 watch, and if I hold down the button, it opens up Samsung Pay, and then after a few minutes, it shuts off. We get into, but I think most of us use it for payment. Anybody use it for file sharing or sharing pictures, those kind of things?
Yeah.
I've done it before, but it's not kind of like, oh, let me share a picture with you, give me your phone. It's I'll send it to you, text it to you, message it to you, those kind of things. There's a portion let's see, where'd it go? Video's a while. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but he has a part that this is the guy that takes over your hotel room TV and can choose whether everybody gets to watch movies or porn.
We just wanted to build a robot, but we didn't know what to make it do. So surfing the web on your hotel TV, I can watch you do it. Sometimes funds transfer, really big funds transfers. You never know what people might want to do while they're surfing the web from their hotel room. But the point is, I get to decide if you're watching Disney or porn tonight. Anybody else staying at the Affinia Hotel?
So this is from 6 years ago.
Right. This is a project I worked on when we were trying to figure out the security properties of wireless networks. It's called the HackerBot. This is a robot we built that can drive around and find Wi-Fi users, drive up to them and show them their passwords on the screen. We just wanted to build a robot, but we didn't know what to make it do.
So just so you know, Bill Gates has invested millions in this guy. He's got a company up in Seattle. He'll say the name of it, where they're using the hacker mentality to cure diseases and stuff. And one of the ones I'll kind of skip around on it, but one of them he talks about is malaria and how they build this device that if it finds a mosquito that acts a certain way, it means it's a carrier, and they have a infrared laser that will burn the wings off of it.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll kill that malaria-carrying mosquito. Yeah, pretty cool. And he also gets into how they have a directional antenna where they can now pick up hack into your device up to a mile away as far as directional go.
So version of the same thing. This is called the Sniper Yagi. It's
there
for your long-range password sniffing action. About a mile away, I can watch your wireless network. Wow. This is a project I worked on with Ben Laurie to show passive surveillance. So what it is a map of the conference called Computers, Freedom, and Privacy. And this conference was in a hotel. And what we did is we put a computer in each room of the conference that logged all the Bluetooth traffic. So as everybody came and went with their phones and laptops, we were able to just log that, correlate it, and then I can print out a map like this for everybody at the conference. This is Kim Cameron, the chief privacy architect at Microsoft. Unbeknownst to him, I got to see everywhere he went. And I can correlate this and show who he hangs out with, if he got bored, hangs out in the lobby with somebody. Anybody here use cell phones? So my phone is calling.
This is pretty scary right here.
You have 100 messages.
Uh-oh.
First 100 message.
Where do I press?
Skip. First skipped message.
Uh-oh.
Main menu. To listen to your
So he's able to hack in and get into his voicemail account.
2 skipped messages. 3 saved messages. Goodbye.
Uh-oh. So we're in Brad's voicemail. And I was going to record him a new message, but I seem to have pressed an invalid key, so we're going to move on. And I'll explain how that works some other day because we're short on time. Anybody here use MySpace? MySpace users? No. Used to be popular. It's kind of like Facebook. This guy, a buddy of ours, Sammy, was trying to meet chicks on MySpace, which I think is what it used to be good for. And what he did is, he had a page on MySpace about him. It lists all your friends, and that's how you know somebody's cool, is they have a lot of friends on MySpace. Well, Sammy didn't have any friends. So he wrote a little bit of JavaScript code that he put in his page so that whenever you look at his page, it would just automatically add you as his friend. And it would skip the whole acknowledgement response protocol of saying, is Sammy really your friend? But then it would copy that code onto your page so that whenever anybody looked at your page, it would automatically add them as Sammy's friend too. And it would change your page to say that Sammy is your hero. So in under 24 hours, Sammy had over 1 million friends on MySpace. Hey, he just finished serving 3 years probation for that. Even better, Christopher Abad, this guy, another hacker, also trying to meet chicks on MySpace, but having spotty results. Some of these dates didn't work out so well. So what Abad did is he wrote a little bit of code to connect MySpace to Spam Assassin, which is an open source spam filter. It works just like the spam filter in your email. You train it by giving it some spam, train it by giving it a little bit of legitimate email, and it tries to use artificial intelligence to work out the difference, right? Well, he just trained it on profiles from girls he dated and liked as legitimate email, profiles from girls he dated and not liked as spam, and then ran it against every profile on MySpace. Outspits girls you might like to date. I think, what I say about Abad is I think there's like 3 startups here. I don't know why we need Match.com when we can have spam dating. This is innovation. He's got a problem and he found a solution. Anybody use these keys for opening your car remotely? They're popular in, well, maybe not in Chicago, okay. Yeah. So kids these days will drive through a Walmart parking lot, clicking open, 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 bloop. Eventually, you find another Jetta or whatever, just like yours, maybe a different color, that uses the same key code. Kids will just loot it, lock it up, and go. Your insurance company will roll over on you because there's no evidence of a break-in. For one manufacturer, we figured out how to manipulate that key so that it will open every car from that manufacturer. There is a point to be made about this, which I barely have time for, but it's that your car is now a PC. Your phone is also a PC. Your toaster, if it is not a PC, soon will be, right? And I'm not joking about that. And the point of that is that when that happens, you inherit all the security properties and problems of PCs. And we have a lot of them. So keep that in mind. We can talk more about that later. Anybody use a lock like this on your front door? Okay, good. I do too. This is a Schlage lock. It's on half of the front doors in America. I brought one to show you. So this is my Schlage lock. This is a key that fits the lock but isn't cut right, so it won't turn it. Anybody here ever try to pick locks with tools like this? All right, got a few nefarious lock pickers. Well, it's for kids with OCD. You've got to put them in there and finick with them, spend hours getting the finesse down to manipulate the pins. For the ADD kids in the house, there's an easier way. I put my little magic key in here. I put a little pressure on there to turn it. Smack it a few times with this special mallet, and I just pick the lock. We're in. It's easy. And in fact, I don't really know much more about this than you do. It's really, really easy. I have a keychain I made of the same kind of key for every other lock in America. And if you're interested, I bought a key machine so I could cut these keys, and I made some for all of you guys. So my gift to you, come afterwards, and I will show you how to pick a lock and give you one of these keys you can take home and try on your door. Anybody use these USB thumb drives? Yeah, print my Word document. Yeah, they're very popular. Mine works kind of like yours. You can print my Word document for me. But while you're doing that, invisibly and magically in the background, it's just making a handy backup of your My Documents folder and your browser history and cookies and your registry and password database and all the things that you might need someday if you have a problem. So we just like to make these things and litter them around at conferences. Anybody here use credit cards? Oh, good. Yeah, so they're popular and wildly secure. Well, there's new credit cards that you might have gotten in the mail with a letter explaining how it's your new secure credit card. Anybody get one of these? You know it's secure because it has a chip in it, an RFID tag, and you can use these in taxi cabs and at Starbucks. I brought one to show you by just touching the reader. Anybody seen these before? Okay. Who's got one? Bring it on up here. There's a prize in it for you. I just want to show you some things we learned about them. I got this credit card in the mail. I really do need some volunteers. In fact, I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 volunteers because the winners are going to get these awesome stainless steel wallets that protect you against the problem that you guessed I'm about to demonstrate. Bring your credit card up here and I'll show you. I want to try it on one of these awesome new credit cards. Okay. So somebody can, do we have like a conference organizer, somebody can coerce people into cooperating? It's really, it's by your own volition because, okay, so this is where the demo gets really awesome. I know you guys have never seen. What's that? They're really cool wallets made of stainless steel. Okay. Anybody else seen code on screen at TED before? Yeah, this is pretty awesome. Okay. Okay, great, I got volunteers. So who has one of these exciting credit cards? Okay, here we go. I'm about to show your credit card number only to 350 close friends. Hear the beep? That means someone's hacking your credit card. Okay, what did we get? Valued customer and the credit card number and expiration date. It turns out your secure new credit card is not totally secure. Anybody else want to try yours while we're here? Beep. Let's see what we got. So we bitched about this, and Amex changed it so it doesn't show the name anymore, which is progress. You can see mine, if it shows it. Yeah, it shows my name on it, or that's what my mom calls it anyway. Oh, yours doesn't have it. Okay. Anyway, so when next time you get something in the mail that says it's secure, send it to me. Oh wait, one of these is empty. Hold on. I think this is the one. Yep, here you go. You get the one that's disassembled. All right, cool. Okay, I still have a few minutes yet left, so I'm gonna make a couple points. Oh shit. That's my subliminal messaging campaign. It was supposed to be much faster. Okay, here's the most exciting slide ever shown at TED. This is the protocol diagram for SSL, which is the encryption system in your web browser that protects your credit card when you're sending it to Amazon.
So this is when hackers get in, they're looking at every single one of these points for some sort of a weakness. And based on, they'll send information that is unexpected or it takes longer or is faster than expected. And based on that, then that gives them in some sort of an in.
Very exciting, I know. But the point is, hackers will attack every point in this protocol, right? I'm going to send 2 responses when the server is expecting 1. I'm going to send a 0 and it's expecting a 1. I'm going to send twice as much data as it's expecting. I'm going to take twice as long answering as it's expecting. I'm going to just try a bunch of stuff, see where it breaks, see what falls in my lap. When I find a hole like that, then I can start looking for an exploit, right? This is a little more what SSL looks like. Hackers, that's really boring. This guy kills 1 million Africans a year. It's an Anopheles stephensi mosquito carrying malaria. Is this the wrong talk? This is a protocol diagram for malaria. So what we're doing in our lab is attacking this protocol at every point we can find, right? It has a very complex life cycle that I won't go into now, but it spends some time in humans, some time in mosquitoes. And what I need are hackers, because hackers have a mind that's optimized for discovery. They have a mind that's optimized for figuring out what's possible. You know, I often illustrate this by saying, if you get some random new gadget and show it to your mom, she might say, well, what does this do? And you'd say, Mom, it's a phone. And instantly she would know exactly what it's for. But with a hacker, the question is different. The question is, what can I make this do? I'm going to take all the screws out, take the back off, and break it into a lot of little pieces. But then I'm going to figure out what I can build from the rubble. That's discovery. And we need to do that in science and technology to figure out what's possible. And so in the lab, what I'm trying to do is apply that mindset to some of the biggest problems humans have. We work on malaria, thanks to Bill Gates, who asked us to work on it. This is how we used to solve malaria. This is a real ad from like the 40s. We eradicated malaria in the US by spraying DDT everywhere. In the lab, what we do is a lot of work to try and understand the problem. This is high-speed video. We have a badass video camera trying to learn how mosquitoes fly. And you can see that they're more like swimming in air. We actually have no idea how they fly. But we have a cool video camera, so we, costs more than a Ferrari. Anyway, we came up with some ways to take care of mosquitoes. Let's shoot them down with laser beams. This is what happens, when you put one of every kind of scientist in the room and a laser junkie. So people thought it was funny at first, but we figured out, we can build this out of consumer electronics. It's using the CCD from a webcam, the laser from like a Blu-ray burner, the laser galvos from a laser printer. We do the motion detection on a GPU processor like you might find in a video game system. It's all stuff that follows Moore's law. So it's actually not going to be that expensive to do it. The idea is that we would put a perimeter of these laser systems around a building or a village and just shoot all the mosquitoes on their way in to feed on humans. And we might want to do that, for your backyard. We could also do it to protect crops. Our team is right now working on characterizing what they need to do the same thing for the pest that has wiped out about 2/3 of the, I think it's about 2/3 of the orange groves in Florida. So people laughed at first. This is a video of our system working. We are tracking mosquitoes live as they fly around. Those crosshairs are put there by our computer. It just watches them, finds them moving, and then it aims a laser at them to sample their wing beat frequency, figure out from that, is this a mosquito? Is it an Ophis stephensi? Is it female? And if all that's true, then we shoot it down with a lethal laser. So we have this working in the lab. We're working on taking that project into the field now. All this happens at the Intellectual Ventures Lab in Seattle where I work, and we try and take on some of the hardest problems that humans have. This is the money shot. You can see we just burned his wing off with a UV laser. He's not coming back. Kind of vaporized his wing right there. Yeah, they love it. I mean, never got called by PETA or anyone else. I mean, it's the perfect enemy. There's just no one coming to the rescue of mosquitoes. Sometimes we overdo it. Yeah, so anyway,
What did you say it was? The intellectual? There you go. Anyway, we won't look at that now. Anyway, so some pretty cool stuff. Talks there a lot about mobility, NFC, some of those types of connections there. Obviously, he's having fun with it. I do not necessarily think like he does. my first initial thought is, how do I build this into something else? Now, I like to tear things down. I like to find all their components, and I'm learning more to think that way from a different mentality or different perspective, just because we need to today in networking. We need to understand that angle or that perspective of the hacker, but we can see where that the way that they think, and he talks about it, you know, not necessarily it's a phone, but what can I do with it? And a lot of the other talks that I've seen, that's kind of the theme is, how can I make this do something different? How can I change this? If you watch some videos when new phones come out, certain groups or people, the first thing they do is buy a phone and tear it apart, and you can video it and they'll find out all the weaknesses and chips and those kind of things. So definitely some interesting things. If you want to look, I just search for networking security for TED Talks. You can find a lot of other things there as well. So USB, right? He said he plugged in his USB and it kind of copied all the important information that you need to there. He showed our NFC laser or the infrared. I skipped that first part, but he actually had something hooked into his computer. That's what hooked up to their TV payment system, is using an infrared. Authentication questions on the ways we log into a phone. That's come up quite a bit, right? Fingerprint, biometrics, PIN number. You have your patterns that you can draw out there. We can almost always go in, whether it's Android or Apple, and set, you know, how long before the computer locks. If I press power, it locks it immediately. This is also where we're starting to see things change, because the new iPhone does the face recognition. I don't even know if the new iPhone has a button on it. For some reason, I remember hearing it did not, but I don't remember for sure. I know my LG has no buttons on the front. I've got a power button back here, but on the front, there's no buttons. So the big concern several years ago is, well, what happens if the screen doesn't work? How do I, well, and there's some issues there, potentially. Remote wiping and encryption. So again, if I were to lose my phone, somebody steals the phone, as long as you set it up ahead of time, you can go in and do a remote wipe. You can also set it up based on if somebody tries a certain number of attempts, then remote wipe it. We also have remote monitoring or tracking, so it'll set off an alarm wherever it is, and you can, you know, find out where that piece is. Anybody have the Apple tags? Let's see. I think it's a keychain. Oh, that's not what I was looking for. Yeah, right here. Is it tile? Oh yeah. So you can buy these individual pieces. You can set them up so that you can track where they are. You can set them up on your keychain so that it will beep if you can't find your keys. Their new Bluetooth earbuds have a tone locator in them, so if you can't find your little earbuds, it'll locate and do those.
These are cool too, because if like you leave your phone somewhere, or not your phone, but you like leave your wallet or your keys and you can't find it, it shows you on your phone or on your account online where the last location was.
The physical location. Do you know if it is, what technology is it? Oh, Bluetooth. Yeah. We switched insurance companies recently. Do you have the tile?
No,
You guys sell them at Best Buy, right? Is it just Apple?
No, you can use them for Android too.
And as long as there's the.
I actually didn't realize those were Apple.
So I initially saw them as an Apple I think Tile might be a standalone, but I know Apple.
But yeah, you basically just download the app and it.
Apple's the first one I remember seeing. $50 for a 4-pack. So we switched insurance companies, and we got a little car sensor that you put in your car, and I guess it goes behind our rear view mirror. And when my wife, when we use the car, she turns on Bluetooth on her phone, and then that keeps track of everything that we do. It senses if we drive too fast, if we brake too hard, if we're driving in off hours kind of things. I think Progressive has a little thing that you plug in kind of underneath your steering wheel. Well, this is probably the size of, maybe the size of this tile. It's maybe 1.5 by 1.5 inches and about 1/2 inch thick. And as long as we have Bluetooth on, it will upload the sensor and do those things. What I don't know is if it keeps track of everything, and then when you connect, it uploads everything previous, or if it only uploads when it's connected. That I don't know. But we can see where those things are going. We get 30% off our insurance if we stay within those guidelines that they suggest or
You
want.
have to keep it plugged in though.
Progressive, I believe you do.
Because Progressive, it's like a week. Like they do it for like a week or a month.
Is
you
it?
just plug it into your emissions sensor,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just like generates a thing, and then that's what they go off of.
Sets a baseline kind of thing. This one, I don't know how long we have to keep it. It just has a little double sticky tape that sticks on.
I'm sure my insurance will go up.
Really? Well,
That's why you just park that car and you drive around the neighborhood. That's what I did. Yeah, that whole discount's great.
you can only go 25 miles an hour. Nobody's.
Well, it's like the accelerant is really what they like look for, and then like they like pinpoint like specific drivers. Because I've heard that they don't even send it to people. But if you're like 55 or older, they don't even send it to you. They just give you like a senior discount and call it good.
Because they know you're gonna
Probably more responsible, hopefully.
hopefully more senile. Yeah, the one this was new to me. I knew the ones that you could plug into your sensor. So we're seeing lots of. I don't know if it tracks where you go. I'm sure it does, whether we see that or not. We've talked about our geolocation. Any of you use access based on where you're physically located? Do you guys deal with that at all with the police? If they're within a certain boundary or location, they have access, or you drop access. I've never had to deal with it. I guess I could see where, I guess I have. And I disabled it very quickly. For me on my phone, it said, when you're at home, do you want to automatically unlock your phone? That was the kind of, and I said, no, I still want to control it. Or when you're at work. So whenever I come into this location or connect to this wireless, it will automatically unlock my phone for me. I didn't like it, but that's one of the things we can do there too. Rooting, jailbreaking, none of us have ever done that, correct? Jailbreaking for Apple, rooting for Android typically. We're basically just rewriting the kernel operating system with a less strict copy. The problem there is if the carrier does find an unlocked or jailbroke phone, they will typically cancel your warranty and anything like that. So I've done it on phones that I no longer use. But I have not done it on a phone that I actively am using. If you want to get into some ethical hacking pieces, there's some additional software you can install. It used to be years ago, they would say, if you want this to work, you have to root your phone or you have to jailbreak your phone. We're seeing less and less of that. Control your applications, right, at work. Administrators say you can or can't install those. Android has the option where you can check a box saying, I can allow unsigned installs. When we talked about certificates last week, one of the things we talk about is code signing, right? Software signing. So I build this piece of software. I have it tested that it's valid, it's secure, it's not malicious in any way. I pay a lot of money to get a signature that confirms that. And then Android is going to say, hey, I'm going to let you install anything that has a signature because it's gone through this vetting process or Apple, as opposed to, hey, this isn't necessarily secure. It may be secure, it just means the company didn't want to pay money for it. So you have to weigh that out. Let's see. All right. Questions on that? Any good or other bad experiences with mobile tech? Drones?
Oh, we had someone flying one around the neighborhood and someone shot it down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They were visiting home neighbors, asking about it.
Did they find out who shot it down?
Yeah. They sure did. But the guy that did it, well, they charged him with firing a firearm within city limits.
Sure.
And then, but I don't think that he ended up having to pay for the other guy, like for the drone, because it was an invasion of privacy.
Invasion of privacy.
So,
That's one of the things that we're looking at, is getting into some security and certifications for drone. And I was looking at the exam, and they talk about knowing what space you can go into, elevations, even getting into like biometric pressures and winds, and how do you control those kind of things. The FAA requires you to be licensed or registered if your drone is over half a pound to 55 pounds.
well, the other thing is like any drone, you can't have it within like, I think it's like 10 miles of an airport.
Yeah.
It might even be more than that,
Yeah.
which is really crappy for Boise because like the airport is right here.
Yeah.
Where it is, I don't know, but I think it's 10 miles.
Yeah, I know they've come down more into that. You guys have mentioned that the police have them, so we're seeing them in law enforcement, military, and other tools there. It can be a great tool. If you want to go to YouTube, just look for drone footage. You can see some amazingly spectacular videos, and just the scenery can be astonishing. Every once in a while, you'll see a shark attack, or you'll see an accident, or you'll see some Loch Ness monster that's been extinct for millennia. But there's some cool things if you ever want to get into them. Anybody have a drone or used a drone? Okay. My son got one for Christmas. It was like 3 inches by 3 inches. It lasted like a week. I think it hit walls too many times.
Down there though by the fairgrounds, like I don't know what the deal is, but there's like a certain time and there's like people that like meet up with tons of drones down there.
Really?
It does not flying around. They do like competitions and whatever else.
So who saw the Olympics this last year? If you saw the opening, let's see, this part was absolutely incredible. They had 1,200 drones synchronized.
That's very cool.
So this was just this last winter.
Oh.
What?
Oh.
So those are all drones. So not a high def quality. So how many UFO sightings are we going to start seeing now? Somebody puts up 4 drones together and makes a certain shape and blinks the lights in Morse code, and I mean that to get them all synchronized together, you get that 3-dimensional effect. So that's where we can start to see things, I think, to a certain extent. Military use, put a little bomb on 1,200 of them, just track people or track, you know, people like they do mosquitoes.
Weapons, you can weaponize them.
Oh yeah.
Instead of sending people in the battle.
To a
Put
drone.
freaking headband on and you can see everything.
I really like the South Park did an episode on that, where there were people with flying around with drones, and they were like spying on the people through the windows, so then the police had drones that were policing the people's drones, and then Homeland Security drones had to come in and control the police ones because they were it's not too far off from actually.
Take a drone that's an explosive and fly for everybody.
So since we're on the drone kick, and my throat's hurting, this is a little clip from Venom. This is not when we talk about militarized. When we talk about militarized, somebody just put this on my computer. I'm not sure how it got there.
I'm trying to electronize. We can discuss this. Bring it to my. What is that? What is that? Do not let him get away. Do you understand?
Notice the X on the headlight, X-Men.
Launch the drone.
That was one of the first Easter eggs they taught me.
Thank you. You are welcome. This is beyond anything we thought it was possible. Holy shit. Please, do not let him get away. I've got him. All ground vehicles move in. Target is now eastbound on Grant. What the? Oh yeah, we got more friends. Awesome. No, you out of the mic. Not for us.
What's that?
So the non-delay
Somebody didn't find it yet. And I'm sure YouTube added each.
You're missing the guy that coughing in the background.
Oh, you still hear him.
power.
Anyway, talk about drones. There you go, militarized drones and bringing it into the movies now. So it is a good movie. And that was one of the first Easter eggs I saw was that the X on the headlight means X-Men. Yeah.
Marvel just bought back rights to most of the they cannot.
Marvel bought them back.
Yeah, most of them.
All right. Another fairly short piece, and then we'll take a break. Virtualization. Talked about it quite a bit. Came up in Network Plus as well. We're seeing more and more virtualization. You guys use it. Two main virtual products. Well, there's the VMware and Hyper-V. Microsoft's product is Hyper-V. We can install it, I believe, back to Windows 8. By default, it's in the system. We just have to go into the add or remove programs and add the feature for it. And then the server has it as well. There's two modes we can run virtualization in, right? We can run it in host mode, or we can run it basically at the machine level. So I can say, I'm going to load off or Word like this. And then when I'm in Word, I'm going to go down and start VMware in once my operating system is running. The other mode is I can install them in boot mode, which means when you start up your system, the virtualization is your host system. So we have those several options there. And so we have our host or direct to the computer. Do you guys know how yours are installed? Are you guys installed on top of an Windows OS or just straight into the computer?
Use Hyper-V.
What about your VMware?
It's,
So do you start up Windows and then have to load VMware?
no, it's not on Windows. It's bare metal, yeah.
Okay, Bear, good. And there's the two types. We have our host as opposed to our bare metal. Obviously, if we go bare metal, we don't have to boot an operating system, use resources. We can go straight into our virtualization top piece. You guys use thin clients at all? How many roughly? No. It used to, I want to say it was pretty big maybe a decade ago, just because hardware was more expensive, where you could just get a thin client box. So cost was a big issue then. Nowadays, hardware is so cheap that we're seeing more and more go away from the thin client. The other thing is if I have thin clients, it means my server has to be able to support more resources for those clients. Citrix is a big one. Ameribin has roughly 800 people employed, and I think they were saying they still have not quite 100 people on their thin clients, and they're trying to get rid of them all entirely. Pioneer Title, roughly 200 employees, and there's about 30 thin clients still left on their network that they're again trying to get going. Yeah. Certain applications work well on that, I know, but again, if your server can support all the connections and the connectivity, you still have your clustering, your load balancing. If one server's busy handling requests, it can offload it to another one. But this is one place, if you haven't dealt with it, you will deal with it from now on. And I think the last probably 5 years or so, we're starting to see this as a standard. So if we're getting a new job at a company, they're going to most likely have virtualization at some point. For us as administrators and IT geeks, it's nice because I can go back to where I just was. Right, so if I open up my Workstation Pro, I don't think these are all still connected, but right now I have Kali Linux, I have a Windows Windows Server 2019 image, Ubuntu 2000 Server 16. I have the new Windows 10 release that's going to be coming out next month or in December most likely. Metasploitable. So we've got right now, I can just toggle in between these different machines and I can do work on all the different pieces. Administratively, it's nice. For training, it's very nice because now I can practice in multiple operating systems using the same tools. Let's see if I have it. I've got one loaded, I'm restarting it. All right. That's down, nice. Okay, so nowadays we hear virtualization. We used to use the term RIS. No, not RIS, that was remote installation services. Terminal server. There we go. That was the product that Microsoft had back since Windows 2000 to emulate and give us this virtualization idea where I had a virtual server, a terminal server, and then my clients could connect to it and run Office and other things off of it. I don't know if terminal server, I don't think it's still part of the operating system since we have Hyper-V now, but I believe we can still install things in a terminal mode as opposed to an application mode. That I don't actually remember. Applications, hosting, streaming, Zen app, AppV, Thin app. Don't think we need to worry about that one. What are the advantages to virtualization? Or what have we talked about so far? How many physical servers do I have to have? At least one. How many virtual machines can I run on a physical server? Depends on the resources. So now I can have multiple virtual servers off one physical box. So they're virtually separated. So if I lose one virtual server, I shouldn't lose the other virtual servers. It becomes very easy. And then as far as our users go, they just connect to server one, server two, whatever it is. So as far as the pros go, how does that help us administrators? Make it easier or more difficult? It should be a lot easier. All right, I think I just closed it again. With the fact that I can just click, 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 and now I have a different server. So I have a domain controller, my Exchange server, my DNS server, and I can, through one console, administrate those very easily. Not that we, most of us are doing remote administration anyways, right? We're just going to sit at our computer and log into the server. So what are some of the negatives of this? If I lose the physical server, what happens to all the hosted virtual servers? If I lose the physical, I lose all the virtual. So there is a single point as well as a multi-point failure. The overhead, obviously the server is doing a lot more work, but the resources can become very supportive. We saw that Windows 2016 can support up to 32 terabytes of memory and 512 core processors. So if you have a server that large, then you can support virtualization quite easily. There's a guy in Security Plus class I did several months ago. He was a consultant, and his clients were all on virtual servers, and he was running 128 gigs of RAM with 64 core processors and he had a 2-node cluster supporting them, and that was more than enough for all of his clients. He had one setup that was a Hyper-V, and another one was a VMware, depending on what the software they were using. And he just got in class and logged in and showed all the students everything. Okay, this is my cluster here. I just right-clicked and changed this to that. Yeah, to support the licenses on the. Yeah, and a lot of times we don't think, oh, let me get 2 or 1 for licensing issues, but. That's right, because it's limited 2, right? All right, so the pros and cons of our virtualization. Security, I think this, all right, security, again, single point of failure. I have to secure one physical box as opposed to multiple. When we talk risk management, how long am I going to allow, what's the time that I can allow between problems or failures? We can also, again, do our redundant servers, synchronize with Azure cloud services. Any other issues or problems you guys deal with as far as virtualization goes?
Web interfaces don't work.
Say that, web interfaces?
Or the software vendors.
Yeah. Still have to deal with patch management and maintenance and things like that. If it wasn't good, we would see it far less in what we do. But I think most companies, medium size and larger, to some extent, run virtualization at some point. We run it here as a test environment. So for our classes, it becomes very easy. Let's create a virtual machine. Boom, the students break it. Guess what? I don't care. I can just restore it or, take a snapshot. Backups become very easy because now I'm just taking a snapshot, and if we do updates and something happens, just roll back. So there are some huge advantages to it. Even as a consultant, the fact that I can go to a client and build a structure for them and have them log into that structure and see it in action through a virtual environment is extremely powerful. We're okay on this. I've asked this a couple times, but we separate the physical from the logical and the physical from the virtual. And sometimes it's hard for us to say, okay, there's a physical server, but yet you're saying I'm running 10 virtual servers on that one physical box. So we just need to be able to distinguish between the physical environment and the virtual or the logical, right? The physical domain controller supports the logical domain that we log into, Active Directory. Let's see. Cloud computing. We have the 3 basic. Software, platform, infrastructure. So here I'm basically leasing and subscribing to software. Here I'm subscribing to a particular application or a particular vendor, perhaps. Here I'm following an entire infrastructure. And if I don't want to pay for all the physical hardware, I can go with a complete infrastructure model, but I'm still paying money. I'm just basically leasing space in the cloud. We talked earlier, and I've talked off and on about internet speeds and how that's less of an issue, so this becomes very easy nowadays. Azure is Microsoft's product. What's cool about Azure, you guys use Azure at all?
Yeah, we have like, very
See if it lets me get in.
not big clouds. It's just means I have about. I mean, the more you virtualize, the less people you. Really. It still takes just as much work, though, to be honest with
It
you,
does.
if not more.
You just have a central node for doing it.
Like you said, I mean, the network engineer has a lot less to worry about, but it's still got it, like, it still has problems.
Hoping to get into the, go to the portal, I think here. You can subscribe to it free for a while, and they'll give you a lot of services for free. But through here, notice I can add services, I can create resources. I have my dashboard, SQL databases, application services, virtual machines, load balancing, storage, virtual networks, Active Directory, monitoring, security, cost management. If I want to come in and add a resource, right, these are all the different things that I can, let's see, is that right? Add resource, yeah. So I can start a Windows Server 2016. This is something you would not have seen 10 years ago. Through Microsoft's product, they're going to let you run and install Ubuntu as far as a Linux server. Databases, right, SQL, mobile, different pieces there, web, storage solutions, networking. So now with Azure, I basically have this infrastructure as a service that I can deal with all these pieces. And if you get a chance to play with it, it's kind of cool to see all the abilities and things that you have there. But with cloud computing, we have, again, our physical site, we have offsite, and then we have hybrid, which is sharing my physical infrastructure with the cloud infrastructure. Excuse me. As a service, right, we see that a lot more. You could probably create any letter at the front of it as a service and it would mean something. Most of what we see is software as a service, platform, or infrastructure. The Amazon Web Services is a big one as well. Excuse me.
Talking too much.
I am. It's killing me. But we're almost done. Security best practices, service level agreement, where's the responsibility, who's responsible, any legal or regulatory, and then certain threats that we have to deal with or account for. And then some of the other services that we can subscribe to with our cloud access. Are we doing the single sign-on? Are we scanning software? Monitoring, migrating data? Holy crap. I just lost a lung. Anyway, let's take a break because I know So that covers most of it for that section. Some of it, again, a lot of that you should be able to read and kind of get the gist of, of what it is and what's going on. So let's take a few minutes and then come back and we'll try to start module 5 or we'll figure something out.
I gotta go.
Okay, well, thanks for sticking around.
Oh, well, yeah. So I don't know what the exam situation is gonna be. I'm not gonna be here tomorrow either, so I got me and next goal.
That's right. Have fun.
Yeah.
You taking your book with you to study? Good, I'm proud of you. When you're not sure about the exam situation, what do you mean by that?
When we're gonna take what if Pam's gonna grab it or when I'm gonna take it or
Gotcha.
we probably should take it soon.
I would within the next week or two, couple weeks.
I'm gonna be back for
That's just to keep the new test questions.
yeah.
If it goes beyond probably 3 or 4 weeks, there will be some new test questions that he'll send you. But even then, it's maybe going to be a dozen or so questions. So it's not like life or
Like maybe the end of this, like the end of like
mid-end of November,
mid to end.
probably,
It'll change.
possibly.
I think he said in the email like the 31st. Take it by the 31st.
Of November?
No, of October.
That's awfully close since he just came out with one. That means he's doing 3 or 4 weeks in between.
So, okay. Well,
All you have to do is once you have your voucher, you just call up the front desk and they'll schedule it for you. Many times you can actually just walk in and they'll schedule it for you as well. And then you can either take it in the back. If room 3 is available, I like to request that because I can close the door. Whereas if I'm in the back, people,
okay.
yeah, but just go through those questions and
All that's excellent.
should be good to go.
Yeah, I got plan tomorrow. So.
I remember you saying that now. I've forgotten that was already.
I wasn't sure if I was gonna go around, but I can't cancel.
Whereabouts are you going down there?
Weeks to see. Well, then about 3 other places, 4 other places.
Have you been there before?
Oh, yeah. I go like 3 times a year usually.
Really?
Yeah, like in food and go all over. I like it.
Did you go with friends or?
Yeah, just to go with my wife, divorced. Just
Sorry,
happens.
I don't know if that's good or bad
Right.
or indifferent. Do you have like a house down there or something?
No, yeah, my wife's wife, yeah, parents. Oh, no, thank you. Appreciate it, though. See, this is kind of a cool thing I bought.
I'm okay, thank you. I'm choking as is.
Like you like it?
Yeah.
Like it
Oh, you-
blocks the.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I got
I
this.
remember you ordered that like what, last week
Yeah.
for the RF.
That's just for the cell phones. It totally works, man. You put it in there, man. It doesn't.
I thought this was for a passport.
I got that for passport too, and I got the wallet. The wallet's like I got to take some credit cards out. It's super. The Constanza wallet. The thing I don't like about it though is that check this out. Like this still works. How is that possible? If this is blocking everything, how would that still work? The proximity.
So you
card.
can keep it in your wallet and it still does?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much.
That totally works.
That's cool.
I've tested it, like tracking your phone, and then you go into, yeah, it goes. You can't call it or anything.
Really? Very
Just
cool.
a little thing.
So there's probably just the aluminum or whatever it is sewed into the fabric or the leather, into that lining probably.
I don't know how it
It
works.
looks kind of metallic.
It is some kind of weird metal that
Huh.
just blocks it.
Very cool.
I didn't even know that would. I always wanted something that would do that.
Well, and from what we just saw, that kind of stuff is becoming more of an issue.
Yeah. Like
At least if you go to a TED Talk.
Yeah, exactly. You guys are ripping off the credit card number.
Well, have a great trip.
Well, thank you.
Bring us back some tequila.
Yeah. So I gotta do this by the end of the month.
Well, that's just for the new questions. You can, as long as you get the new questions, it'll be a little easier. But like I said, there's not going to be, it doesn't like completely reset the test questions. They just add questions onto it.
Said I could this day, but it just had to put this one. So. Oh, that's cool. We got that.
It's Windows 2019. I just downloaded the new one. I'm trying to.
Well, what it is that's installed in not GUI mode. So
Yeah.
If you install it, it's
This is core mode.
core, yeah. That's core right there.
But I've gone through. I've enabled it, set it up to automatic.
Yeah, you can do that with 2016 core mode. It's just pretty similar.
2008 does it too. R2, well, 8, 12.
12 R2.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't do a whole lot in core mode, but
It's a pain. I like it.
I just like the graphics side.
But you just put the tools on your workstation.
Oh, exactly. Well, you can even set up a GPO. So if you log on with under a certain OU, you automatically get the tools installed.
And it's a lot more secure.
Yeah, because you eliminate the whole GUI. Oh, so much. Well, have a great trip.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you around.
Oh yeah.
what's the tool? Autopsy. Have you guys ever had to get into that? It's a free download. It is let me see. It's like 400 or 500 meg. It's a pretty big file. But I'll just load it real quick so you can kind of see some of the options.
This thing's completely free.
This one is. I'm sure there's a enterprise model.
I'm sure it's free for you. We get off,
I would imagine.
and then we get some.
So autopsy, so when you have a particular incident that occurs, you can either open up a new case, recent cases, or existing cases. So if I just say a new case, right, I would give it a name, 1, 2, 3. If we have a particular directory, is it a single user, multi-user? It looks like in this version, it's a single user only. Let's go there. Autopsy. Case number, examiner. I'm just going to hit finish. It creates our database. There we go. Maybe. Should I open it? Oh, there we go. All right, so if we have a particular problem, we can go select an image, virtual file, local disk, any sort of logical virtual disks, and unallocated space. Let me see, I'm just gonna look for an image, and I've got one over here somewhere. I did. Oh, maybe not. I thought I had some virtual machines. Anyway, you would go ahead and grab the drive. It's going to go through select it. And then once we select it, up above, we have, again, we have our images and video. We have our editor as far as what type of account are we looking at. Is it social media, email, phone, device? we can then come up under our, oops, wrong one, our timeline. No, if there's no data. Anyway, this will be kind of like a project management where you can set certain timelines on when certain forensics are done. Obviously generate reports so that you can then put them through for some, for auditing or something like that. And then once you're done, you can finally come through and close a particular case.
What kind of data does it log? What is it running?
What do you mean?
What is this application used?
What is it used for? For forensics. Like hard drive cloning. If you're, this is going to be one of those reactive things. You have a problem and you need to take a copy or clone as is instead of trying to, so it's not as much monitoring as it is actually getting a machine and
Pulling everything.
exactly. This is one that was a free download. It's in the Ethical Hacker and Security Plus. It's a fairly standard. See if it lets me add. Run as administrator. I could have swore I had an image, but run as an admin. Well, I'm not going to restart it. Anyway, I guess if I needed to, I would just right click and run as admin to get admin rights. So anyway, that's one of the tools. They also, of course, have help so you can get documentation. And then once you work on it, you can access it later. Other people can, depending on whether you have a single user or multi-user. Like I said, it is fairly big in size. So this would probably be on one of your grab bags on a USB drive if you needed to. I kind of shared the story. I had to deal with this with more of a corporate espionage, corporate data theft. And we had to go through and do this. It was in California, had to get a detective involved who was more familiar with the procedures as far as storing data, retrieving data, monitoring and documenting. But really, as far as the procedures go, we're almost always dealing with forensics after the fact, or maybe during the fact, but it's never necessarily before the fact. So we'll need to collect evidence if we need to put some sort of a case together. Now, some of this will be us specifically for IT. There may be other documentation as far as HR, accounting, some other pieces that need to be retrieved as well. Go through the legal process, go through our discovery, make sure that, and we have the term worm. We've seen that one in this one, not like as a hacking term or a worm or virus. So this is the ethical hacker one. I don't think you see it on this test, but we write once, write once, read many. Right, so forensically, we want to have data that can be only written one time, can't be rewritten, can't be copied, or, well, it can be copied, but can't be altered in any way, yet we can read it many times. So not like a DVD rewritable drive, but just a writable disc or Blu-ray or whatever it may be. So forensically, this is kind of what we follow. I want to be able to take a copy that's just copied once, but that many people can then read and decipher and pull data from. For us, evidence could be everywhere from, so for me, it was computer forensics. It was actually getting into email. We had our own email server, our web server, firewall logs. Got into the physical access of the computer as far as USB drives, external drives that were connected to it. For us, because it was me, we actually got into going through the file cabinet, looking for paper documentation, any sort of documentation that was there. We didn't have to worry about video or audio being a part of it. As far as him doing anything, we didn't have to, basically there was enough proof to fire on site as opposed to having to interview to see what the problems were. In our case, we were able to be somewhat proactive in that we knew there was a problem and started to track everything. And we did it much more passively, not that he would have understood or known what we were doing, but we started keeping track of everything very quietly as he's going through and doing these things. And we were able to do it for, several days, week or so. But now when we're talking about data, we're talking probably still the basics is the hard drive, CPU usage, cache, memory, our ARP tables, temporary files, remote logging, any performance monitoring, how are things physically configured, did he or she actually change configurations to alter, steal, and if you ever want to see more about it, just watch a few movies. There's some good movies out there, or bad movies that talk about corporate espionage. There was one with Ben Affleck called Payday or Pay Something, where he was hired as a reverse engineering specialist. So if somebody would steal something, lock him in this lab for like a year or two as he would take that product, reverse engineer it, and then they would wipe his mind so he wouldn't remember what he did. And then they have their new product, which is reverse engineered. And then, of course, I think it's with Aaron Eckhart and some other things there. So a little bit extreme, but we do see things all the time as far as people wanting to take the short route and get what they need to. As far as evidence go, timestamps, network traffic logs, those are all going to be critical, like for everything. We also have, I showed you the device from the Certified Ethical Hacker. Killian found it on eBay or Amazon pieces for just over 100 as opposed to 750 bucks. Mm-hmm. But you can buy specific hardware that will clone bit by bit or block by block. And that's, again, getting into this worm where it's going to write once and then allow us to read many times. In this case here, it's an UltraDoc. Some people in the other classes actually had this specific device. Anyway, so it lets us keep track of the data in it at its point in time. All right, I'm going to show this video. We've seen some of his. He has the whole, and if you want to, you can go to YouTube, just do a search for CompTIA or do Security Plus 501, and it's the person here is Professor Messer, so you can actually go to messer.com, and he has a video for every single chapter and unit for this particular class. Just make sure you do the 501, that's the new version. The 401 is the previous version of Sec Plus.
Always be a need to collect forensic information, and this will come from many different data sources. You might want to refer to RFC 3227. This is the guidelines for evidence collection and archiving. It will give you a very good set of best practices for forensic data collection. It's common to have a standard digital forensic process so you know exactly how the data was gathered and how that information will be stored. This will detail the acquisition, the analysis, and the reporting of that data. All of this is extremely detail-oriented, and it's important that someone take extensive notes during the forensic process. Not all data has the same volatility. Some data will stick around for longer time periods than others. This table shows the order of volatility where the most volatile data is the data that's inside of a CPU register or a CPU cache. As we get less volatile, you can find temporary file systems or even files that are stored on disk. And some of the least volatile data you'll find is archival media, which is usually kept around for years. Whenever evidence is gathered, there needs to be some way to maintain the integrity and control all of this evidence. One very common way to do this is with a chain of custody. This means that everyone who comes in contact with this evidence will be able to document that they touched this particular piece of information. And this will also help to avoid anyone else tampering with or modifying this evidence. With a chain of custody, every piece of evidence is cataloged and labeled, and everything is sealed so that you can store it and make sure that no one is able to tamper with any part of that evidence. As an IT professional, you may be asked to store evidence through the use of a legal hold. This is a legal technique that ensures that any data that may be associated with a particular legal proceeding is held and kept so that nothing is lost. This is usually created to prepare for some impending litigation, and it's usually a legal document provided to you. This is usually provided as a hold notification, which tells you exactly what kind of data and how much should be preserved. If this is electronically stored information or ESI, there will be a separate repository created just for this data, and you're usually storing many different kinds of data. There might be personal files, there might be documents, or there might be email messages. And these legal holds may include ongoing preservation. So not only are you preserving the older data, you're also preserving any new data that's created. The contents of a storage drive may contain very valuable forensics data. So it's common to create a system image of that drive so that you're able to look at and manipulate a copy of that data without affecting the original drive itself. Commonly, we would create a system image on a bit for bit or byte for byte basis, so you have an exact duplicate of everything that was on that drive. There are software imaging tools that are specialized to create this, and you can even use a bootable device to be able to copy that drive without affecting any of the drive that currently exists. It's sometimes common to physically remove the drive to make sure that nothing overwrites data, and it's common to add that drive to a hardware write blocker that allows you to read the data from the drive, but the hardware itself prevents you from writing anything onto that important forensics data. And sometimes,
Do you guys have anything like that at work?
Yeah.
Is it like a forensic closet or forensic box where there's just stuff you need? How often do certain officers that are involved in this have their specific equipment as well?
Yeah, we have a good forensics guy that he has his whole office.
He's got a bunch of tools.
I was gonna say,
Bunch of tools to work.
you guys ever taken the lunch and stuff?
I've talked to him and stuff. I don't know.
So if he's a specialist in forensics, is he fairly IT knowledgeable as well?
He lacks in certain areas. He is very, he knows his job.
That
but he's not
specific
very
part.
high as far as technical.
So as far as like infrastructure stuff, routers, switches,
That regular.
okay,
He does know some of it, but that's not his specialty.
sure. Well, it all helps. I think if you are dealing with forensics, and maybe he's dealing with forensics more on an individual machine basis, as opposed to, servers or networks, but, so much of what we deal with is the one user doing many things. But, well, that would be, yeah, I would definitely keep that, his contact information. That kind of stuff is really cool. Even going back next week saying, hey, we were looking at this, and how do you do it? And what are the tools you use, kind of thing. When you get new tools, can I borrow your old or have your old?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they use it in case for something, but you can guess it's just in hardware pieces that I haven't seen.
You know if he uses like Kali Linux at all?
For removing chips and chips.
Oh, so the physical,
No, he does not use Kali.
as far as forensic tools.
I'm sure he has things that are licensed. He probably doesn't give you free.
Sure. And there's one guy that does it for the most part?
Well, there's two, but there's one guy that's at our level.
Okay.
The other one is mainly in Boise, but they work together.
So is he would be a part of the Boise police, or is he a part of your police but works with Boise?
Well, the guy that's at our piece, place of business is he's MPD. The other guy, I'm not so sure. He's
Okay.
He might be 42.
So here, but anyway, so we're talking physical hardware that's doing that. Some of this stuff isn't even used forensically, but it's just used on a supportive nature. If you, like I know a lot of point of sale machines have SSD drives, and so you'll clone one drive and, you know, just copy it to others. Some of these machines are, you know, stat real high where you can have one clone and then you can write to a dozen different hard disks at the same time as well.
Sometimes even if someone deletes an entire drive, all of that information may already be backed up. So don't forget about getting the backup drives to make sure that you really do have all of the data you can use. Many attacks occur across the network, so it's important to capture as much log information as possible. These are coming from your switches, your routers, your firewalls, and almost anything else that's connected to the network. Intrusion prevention systems can provide you with some unique log details since those devices are specialized at looking for attacks. And some organizations have the luxury of storing all of their raw network data. The stream-to-disk solution captures every packet going across the network and stores and archives that information to disk. From there, you can rebuild file transfers, email messages, and examine any specific data transfers that may have occurred across the network. Sometimes a security event might happen outside the scope of a computer and a network, and in those cases, it's important to store any video you may have of the incident. You can also take your own video of the incident. If you're working on a system that has been compromised, it might be useful to gather video of any changes or messages that may be on the screen. Many organizations also have security cameras that are watching many different parts of the organization 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. These may be very valuable sources of forensics. All of this video information must be archived and saved so that you can go back and evaluate it during the investigation. When you're trying to correlate together log files, video evidence, and other types of evidence, you may be looking at timestamps to do that. But it's also important to understand what the offsets might be for a timestamp on a system. Usually this is determined by the time zone settings that may be on a local device, so it's important to document exactly how a particular device is configured. For example, in the FAT file system, the time is stored in its local time. If you're using NTFS, those files store information with a timestamp that is marked with GMT. You can record this time offset directly from the operating system. Windows keeps it in the Windows registry, and you want to be sure that you not only document the time zone, but you document whether daylight saving time and any time changes are also configured for that system. For physical evidence, we know that we can catalog and seal that evidence so there's no tampering. With digital evidence, we can perform a similar function by using hashes. One type of hash we might use is the MD5 hash, or Message Digest 5. This is a 128-bit hash. This means that if anybody modifies that digital information, the chance of duplicating that hash is 1 in 2 to the 128th power, or 230 billion. Another type of check that we often see with network communication is the CRC, or the cyclical redundancy check. This is a 32-bit hash, and it means that the chance of duplication is 1 in 2 to the 32nd power, or 1 in just over 4 billion. It's very common when capturing files, images, and other digital information to create an MD5 hash, and then it's very easy to then reconfirm that that MD5 hash is valid by creating the hash later on and comparing those two values.
You'll see MD5 on the test, not necessarily just in forensics, but as far as one of the hashed algorithms. And you may see the CRC, the cyclical redundancy check, when they're talking about how do you verify and validate data. One of the things with the CRC is that Windows Server uses this as well. So it uses the cyclical redundancy check as it's synchronizing to make sure that the hashes are in fact the same. So what's the chance of winning the lotto if you have a 230 billion chance? Does anybody know if somebody won Mega Millions?
In South Carolina.
Dang it. I bought a ticket and I hadn't checked. I was just thinking, somebody in Meridian won. What? Let me go check.
Someone in Meridian did one?
No, I was saying I had a card. I bought one last night, but I haven't checked it. So if you were to say somebody in Meridian won, I was like, oh, probably me. I had dreams about it last night.
I bought 5 for that, 5 for Powerball.
What's Powerball at?
I thought it was 6.
I was more focused on the.
Well, that's the.
Either way, I'd take like 1,000. I don't need to win the
I
whole
know.
thing.
That's the highest the Mega Millions has ever gotten.
Right. Powerball is
Yeah, because like between the two is like a lot. Yeah.
2+ billion. Well, Mega Millions used to be a $1 ticket.
So did Powerball.
Yeah, but Powerball jumped up years ago, and so now they brought Mega Millions up. So anyway, so MD5 you'll see on the exam, CRC, when they get in, and you'll see a few questions on forensics, more about the processes and cloning, chain of command, and more general questions as opposed to specific legal questions.
A lot of valuable forensic information goes by on the screen, so it's useful to get screenshots to be able to capture what the state might be of a particular screen. We might use some type of external device like a phone or a digital camera to capture this information, or we can use built-in functions of the operating system like the print screen key or a third-party screen capture utility. And it may be useful to gather witness testimony, especially if there's a physical component of this particular attack.
So in our case, I did take screenshots of certain directories, specifically files and folders that contained certain items. We did have to have 2 individuals as potentially called as witnesses. One of them was myself, but it didn't get to the point where we actually had to be produced or at least do that. It didn't get to that point, but we had to have witnesses there as well.
You want to be sure to interview anyone who may have seen information and document anything that they may have seen. And you want to be sure to do it as quickly as possible. Some people may leave the organization or have a difficult time remembering what happened later on. Although witness statements are not 100% accurate, you may be able to build more evidence by interviewing more people and being able to correlate all of those different stories together.
And then last part.
It's important to preserve all of your forensics data, and there will be a lot of data that you need to gather. It's, of course, important to have this data for the current investigation. You need to be able to look through all possible evidence to determine exactly what occurred during that incident. And there may be a future incident that may cause you to want to revisit this data to see if there's any correlation between the 2 incidents. There may also be cases where you discover new pieces of evidence that will require you to go back to the data to be able to look for different kinds of information.
We actually had this problem because the person that that we had hired and were having problems with on our network, as soon as we found out, my dad was CEO down for the U.S. division, and he actually knew the owner of the previous company and went and talked to their CEO to resolve it immediately. And it turns out that they had suspicions of what this person had done when they hired him several years before. So I don't know if anything came from it, but I do know that the fact that we had a certain incident that had occurred, it kind of validated some of their proof of what may have happened years before. And so we had to work with that as well.
There's also a need to be able to recover from this incident, and the more data you have, the easier it will be to create a strategy for next time. If you're able to collect and process all of these details, you may be able to find important information that you could use to protect yourself later. And building on that, you'll be able to make policy changes and modifications to your processes that will help protect you based on all of this intelligence that you found. There might also be an opportunity to provide counterintelligence. Now that we've gathered details about the attacker, we may be able to learn more information about what they are or who they are. You may be able to find different habits or different methods that are unique to this particular attacker, and that might allow you to identify them later. One rule of thumb in information security is to constantly log as much information as you can. If you're logging everything everywhere, then you may be able to track exactly what an attacker does from the very beginning until the very end of their attack. Some of these security incidents have a very large scope. They may be affecting many different systems across many different parts of your organization, and it may be using a lot of your resources to be able to respond to these large-scale attacks. This may have an extensive financial impact on the organization, so it's important to track all of the man hours and all of the expenses associated with this investigation. You want to be as accurate as possible with determining these expenses, because all of this may be required when you get to a legal environment where restitution may be an option.
All right. So a little bit on forensics, probably one of our shortest sessions as well, just maybe 8 or 10 pages long. Questions on that? Let's do this. We've got 3 units left. Why don't, and it's 3:30. Why don't we stop there? Part of it is my fault, but why don't we take, if you want to leave, you can. If not, then why don't we do a little bit of the test prep? Go through some of the questions if you want to, and then my wife is actually, the doctor called in some medicine for me that will kind of help. So I'm hoping that should work. So tomorrow I'll be able to talk a little bit better without killing myself. Any questions? Jess has only known me sick. Just about. I'm really not that sick, but I guess for some reason my body's pissed at me right now. I think you can even log in to the app on this computer if you want to use the same app, right?
Yeah.
Unless you wanted to use the other one. And you say you don't know if Pam will be here tomorrow? Don't know? Okay. We know Mike won't.
What did you say? Oh, yeah.
He's going to Mexico. And tomorrow it's disaster recovery, so not tons there. The big part of that is going to be like our RAID solutions, the different RAID options, risk management, covered some of that, securing our apps, and then again, organizational security. So kind of like how do you get rid of hard drives and shred paper and records, and how do you, what kind of policies do you have in place? So I think we're good.
Have you ever watched DEFCON 18 Owned by Owner?
Which one?
DEFCON 18, it was a talk that was entitled Owned by Owner.
I don't think so.
That's what happens when you steal a hacker's computer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
You can
It's
put,
back in
2010?
yeah, Jim.
We can put that on in the background.
It was pretty funny.
All right, I have it on no less of an authority of speaking on at DEF CON than Jason Scott here, that everyone is really confused about what room they're supposed to be in, and talk should start like a few minutes late. So to fill in some time before I get started, I thought I'd just tell you a little story about my other experience with computers and the police, which was soon after I got to MIT. you know, you get to MIT and there's this whole kind of pulling hacks ethic, right? Like doing these pranks to amuse people. And so, you know, you start immediately looking for things to do. And I noticed outside my lab across the street, there was a manhole that had been opened, and there were some lights in it and some power cables dangling in it, like extension cords. And it sat there like that for weeks. And, you know, what the hell's going on? There wasn't even like cones around the manhole to stop people from falling in. It just sat there, and we were just like, well, we don't know what's going on here, but maybe we should turn it into a hack. So we got an old VT220 terminal and decided we would set it up on the edge of the manhole with a lamp, as though some hacker had like popped out of the manhole and was up to no good with their VT220, hacking, you know, whatever was in the manhole. And we would film it. We'd set up a camera on the 7th floor of the building next door and film what was going on to see if we got any good reactions. So we go down, you know, at about 8 p.m. or something. It's dark in Boston at 8 p.m. And we set up a VT220 on a little desk lamp and everything and make this kind of setup. And we go back in and take the elevator up to the 7th floor to set up the video camera. And that was the fatal error, because by the time we had got up to the 7th floor office to set up the video camera, the cops had already arrived and were staring at this computer, you know, wondering what was going on. And then, you know, we're looking at the cops, looking at this computer, and then suddenly, for no apparent reason, they just start kicking the shit out of it. And one of the cops picks up the keyboard, you know, bam, and keycaps are flying everywhere. And we're just like, oh my God, why didn't we set up the computer? Well, I mean, the video camera. You know, this is like Rodney King for computers right here. So we learned 2 lessons from that. Firstly, you know, always set up the video first. And secondly, we started, you know, fantasizing about what else we could have done. Imagine, because after they finished beating it up, they loaded all the broken parts into the police car and they took it off. Who knows where? And we thought, if only we had some kind of radio transmitter hidden in that V220, so we could hear what those guys were saying. Like, what did they think it was? What kind of totally evil computer break-in to this manhole, which is probably like a sewer or a steam tunnel, could have been going on? So second lesson, recordings, audio, video, get a radio link, because you just never know what's going to happen. Even with the police, they're very unpredictable. So okay, we're almost 4 minutes in, so I think I can get started. You guys have all read the description of the talk, so you know the basic gist. My desktop computer got stolen out of my place, and there's been a lot of stories lately about people who had their computer stolen or their iPhone stolen and have recovered it. So they've recovered their laptop because they've clicked the iSight and they've retrieved a picture of the person using it, and they've got the "Where's my iPhone" feature and stuff like that. But this is not a mobile piece of equipment, doesn't have a camera in it, so the situation was a little bit more complicated. And the circumstances of the theft, I just have to confess what happened. It was a straightforward physical security fail. I placed it on the 2nd floor. There are 3 locks between. I rate everything in terms of zombie defense. So my keys are coded in terms of danger of zombie access. So the green key is the outside, the yellow key is the 2nd floor, and then the red key is my room. But unfortunately, we're not dealing with zombies in this case. They climbed through a 2nd floor window via an access method that I hadn't noticed, and then busted the red lock. So just had to bypass one door. It's the kind of thing where this whole situation could have been prevented with a $20 deadbolt. So that's worth keeping in mind. But the upshot of it was my Macintosh, which was a Quicksilver G4, my pride and joy, was now gone. I'm the kind of person that keeps religious daily backups. In fact, I kept religious daily redundant backups. Unfortunately, both of those were stored in the same room as the server and were also stolen. Lesson, offsite backups. These days, I dumped everything onto a portable hard disk and gave it to my parents in Australia and said, I hope I never need to ask you for this back, but I might one day. Very, very traumatic to me. I lost all my music, all my photos, all my video projects. That's what the internet's for. So I had to channel that energy into trying to find my machine. I get very angry without my heavy metal. So what I did have was the serial number of the machine and the stats of what machine it was. And so I started to look for it in the kind of usual places you would think someone would dispose of a machine. So I started searching eBay and Craigslist for months, and I didn't find it. Fuck. Now, someone asked me almost immediately when it got stolen, if it gets plugged back into the network, will you be able to find it again? And I thought, yes, I'm running a DNS updater. It'll update the domain record and I'll see it again. And then I thought about it a bit more. And I thought, well, the machine is set to auto boot into single user mode. Okay, so my data security policy at that time could definitely have used work. And I thought, well, the guy can boot into it, but it's not going to get back on the network because I'm pretty sure the network settings are locked and it's on an intranet. So the thief is not going to be easily able to reconnect it to the network unless they happen to have an intranet with the same settings as I did. Unlikely. So, fuck. So even with my legendary stubbornness, I eventually gave up looking for the machine on sale sites and trying to get people to go to, I was in San Francisco filming Prototype This at the time, so I'm trying to get people in Boston to go to flea markets for me and look for it, and they're telling me to fuck off, as you would expect. So, all right, time passes.